Okay then, 3 track days in 3 months. Last one of the year. Let's go. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Silverstone Grand Prix circuit. A very special place for me. I did my first track day here in January 2006, my first track day ever, which is nearly 20 years ago. It's crazy. I've been coming here quite a few times since then, but not on the Grand Prix circuit since 2017, just due to circumstances and costs, which I'll come on to in a bit. But anyway, I had a brilliant time with the 420, really getting close to its current potential and feeling a lot more confident with the car. For the third time in these 3 months, the weather was perfect, yet again, very un-English, but my strategy of booking track days last minute once the forecast is known is definitely paying off. Quick shout out to fellow Caterham drivers Sean and Harry, who were in the garage with me, along with Chris from PT Sports Cars. Sean has a very nice 420 Cup, which has done a lot of track miles so far. Great to see it being used as intended. And Harry Senior, who was racing his 420R on the international circuit the day before, going very well indeed. It was really great chatting to everyone, and especially comparing some of Harry's data with mine, learning a few things along the way, so that was really cool. Plus, of course, having a 420R which is very close to Cup spec next to an actual Cup, next to an actual race car. That was great. It was really fascinating just looking at the similarities and the differences. They really are tremendous cars. You can't beat a Caterham at this level. So in this part 1 video of a look at my day at Silverstone, I'll show you 2 laps and then briefly talk about the good and the bad from the day. And then in part 2, I'll go through some data and see what can be learned. These laps were my very last laps of the day, when I finally had clear air and managed them both without being impeded by traffic. It's always a risk trying to push at the end of a long day, but a lot of people have packed up and gone home by this point, so you do tend to get a quieter track. The first lap, a little conservative, but then I immediately knew where I could push a bit more on the second lap, which, if I hadn't have suffered from fuel surge on the exit of Brooklands and run wide at Club, would have been a 2:17. Instead, I had to settle for a 2:18 18.26, which honestly I'm super happy with still. It's not far off race pace and is comfortably under the 2:20 goal I'd set for myself. So here we go then, a couple of hot laps around the Silverstone Grand Prix circuit in a Caterham 420R. And there we go. As well as my off tracks on lap 2, you'll probably have noticed the juddering on the brakes at a few corners. That's due to a bit of rear locking, and on the slicks in particular it causes the axle to jump around a bit. It kind of is what it is. The race cars do it as well to an extent. I experimented with moving the brake bias the final notch to the front, but then I locked the inside of front a couple of times. I probably should have persevered with that though. I also tried opening the throttle slightly while the rears were locking, which did help, but created a bit of push, so it wasn't really something I stuck with. The brakes and suspension are all good, but where the A-frame connects with the Didion was slightly under torqued despite being okay on my pre-track day checks, so I'll be keeping a closer eye on that for next time. Otherwise, the car was great fun, and I managed 200 miles around the track. I did struggle a little bit with understeer, but speaking with Harry and Chris, it's quite tricky to dial that out completely at Silverstone. My setup could definitely be better for roll bars and overall stiffness of the car, and my slicks have had a lot of heat cycles now, so some of it is to be expected. And I was much more confident left foot braking and was doing that at all times throughout the day. For me it means I can brake harder because I'm not adjusting my foot to heel and toe, so braking is more consistent. It just gives me more confidence, and that is feeling really natural now, which is great. The last thing I want to talk about is the cost of doing this day at Silverstone. So for context, in the UK there are a number of circuits around the country, and the track days that happen are either run by the circuit themselves or are organised by other track day organisers or owners clubs or other entities who are effectively renting the circuit from the owner and then reselling places for drivers to take part. When I started doing track days all those years ago at Silverstone, they didn't offer days directly. They were only through track day organisers or clubs. Then around the time the new Wing pit lane complex opened, they started doing their own track days, which were a little bit more expensive than normal, but not by that much. And to be clear, Silverstone has always been expensive. But they included the use of the new pit lane and facilities, and included breakfast and lunch for drivers. Numbers were low, and it was very professional and grown-up atmosphere. They were really good days, and the slight bump in price over a third-party day could be justified, I'd say. And then a few years ago, all of the third-party days at Silverstone stopped. To this day, as far as I'm aware, you can only book a track day at Silverstone via the circuit themselves. And what has that done for prices? Well, this day at Silverstone cost me £649. I'll let that sink in for a moment. That figure is comprised of £589 for entrance and £60 to reserve a garage. Both of those numbers are an order of magnitude higher than anywhere else in the UK, and this was on a weekday in October, not even peak season, and they do even more expensive days than that. My day at Brands Hatch last month was near enough half the price, and Donington was even less. The cost is frankly ridiculous, and by the time I add 80 litres of fuel for the Caterham plus fuel in my tow car, it's a very, very expensive day out. And yet, many of their days sell out. The problem is, if you really want to drive the circuit, you have to pay their price, because there is no competition from other track day organisers. And arguably, I'm part of the problem because I've done just that. But it's painful. There were a lot of red flag stoppages during the day, compared to just one at Brands last month. Breakfast was included, but no lunch. And the day was run from the old National paddock, which is not in the best of condition these days, with the garages in particular looking a bit run down, especially on the inside. Photography was included, but all of the images are watermarked, and many of them, in my opinion, are quite poor. MSV photography at Brands and Donington is much better, I think, even if you do have to pay for it. It's just such a shame. I love the circuit, it's a brilliant challenge in any car, and the history is undeniable. but at the thick end of £650, it just isn't good value for money. You could do 2 or more track days elsewhere in the UK for that. At a minimum for that price, I'd expect meals and the use of the wing pit lane. But even then, it's incredibly hard to justify. There's an argument that the price is in line with inflation, given that a day on the Grand Prix circuit in 2012 would have cost £399. But then why haven't the prices at other circuits gone up by the same amount? There's also an argument that Silverstone is a big place. It's a big facility and will naturally have higher costs than most other circuits in the UK, and that needs to be reflected in the prices they charge. I get that, but even so, the prices feel disproportionately high. I think it really boils down to the lack of competition, because there just isn't any, while Silverstone have an effective monopoly on Silverstone track days. And perhaps I'm just not their target audience anymore. So I'm sad to say I won't be going back anytime soon. But what I will be doing soon is publishing part 2 of this video, where I'll look at some data. Thank you so much for watching. Please keep subscribing and commenting, and I'll see you next time.